What's up, ladies and gents? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Francisco. This is part 5, Final Fantasy VII Remake Road to Rebirth. This is the final episode of the series. In this video, we're going to be covering the events of the game, starting with the end portion of the Shinra Tower, all the way to the very end of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And before we get started, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody who has taken the time to watch all of these videos. You've taken the time to comment, sprinkle in your theories, correct me on mine, add to mine, debunk mine, make fun of mine, whatever it is. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really sincerely appreciate that. I appreciate the comments, the positivity, the support, everything. It's been an absolute blast. And I don't think it would have been as fun if it weren't for all of you engaging with this series. So sincerely, I appreciate each and every one of you. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go ahead and pick up right where we left off. In part 4, we basically left off with Sephiroth literally flying away, floating away with Genova's body. We go ahead and exit President Shinra's office, chasing after him, and you see Cloud here climbing up some ladder, trying to get to Sephiroth. And as we approach Sephiroth in this ladder, the Whispers once again come in and try to intervene. I'm guessing to stop Cloud from reaching Sephiroth and interfering any further. And as soon as we kind of, get a little cut in the camera, you see that this Sephiroth transforms back into a clone, which then just dive bombs off the side of the building and goes away. Shortly thereafter, we are faced with Rufus, President Shinra's son. We kind of have a little bit of dialogue with him very briefly. The party runs away. Cloud stays behind to buy everybody time to get away, and we go ahead and fight Rufus. The Rufus boss fight is probably one of my favorite boss fights in the game because it has its challenges, but if you know what to do, basically if you can hit him with Braver, I think like one time, you can stagger him. And once you stagger him, I mean, he just absorbs damage like crazy. And I mean, absorb's probably a bad term to use here because that would mean in an RPG that he's not taking any damage. What I should have said better is that he just takes an incredible amount of more damage once he's staggered. So one Braver and just a couple of combos in and he is done for, and we can move on with our lives. We switch on over to Baird and Tifa and Red 13. And of course, as we're descending down this elevator, the gigantic robot, I forgot what it's called, chases after us. We get to the very bottom floor and we fight this robot too, which is also a pretty awesome fight, if I may say so myself. Once this fight's complete, Baird, Aerith, and Red 13 are back at the lobby entrance of Shinra Tower, and they get stopped by a swarm of Shinra soldiers along with Heidegger. Heidegger, he's blabbing about like basically this is going to be their last chance to say anything before they're all killed. And of course, right in the nick of time, Cloud shows up, except this time he's on a motorcycle and he uses his motorcycle in very fancy maneuvers to take down all the soldiers. And Tifa pulls up in her little Ford F-150, picks up Baird, picks up Red 13, and away they go. They drive through this window, and now we're in the highway chase scene portion of the game that if you've played the original, you're very familiar with, because this is not one-for-one how everything happened, but basically, yes, we get on a motorcycle, they get on a truck, and, we make our getaway, and the same exact thing basically happens here in Remake. Now, up to this point, from the beginning of this video to right now, although there are probably some little nuanced differences in how things went down, for the most part, everything has gone down the same exact way as it did in the original game. So we have not deviated in any major fashion from the original story. As we're driving away on the highway, the crew comes to a stop and they take a look back at Shinra Tower, and Shinra Tower is all of a sudden engulfed, surrounded by swirling vortex of these Whispers. And it's not just like 1 or 20 or 30. I'm going to estimate it's in the hundreds of these things are just swirling this tower. And the first time that I saw this, when I played the game originally, when it came out, Final Fantasy VII Remake that is, I thought they were trying to keep the party from going back. But now on second thought, I think that the Whispers surrounded the building to keep everyone else in, from getting out, from pursuing the party. And I think more specifically, it was to limit the amount of soldiers that could chase after Cloud and party, because if any more people chased them in this highway, there's a greater chance that they would be, I guess for lack of a better term, killed, which is what the Whispers don't want, because they want the events of this game to happen as closely as the events of the original game did. One interesting thing that we see here is we see Rufus kind of walking down some stairs in the Shinra Tower, and he makes a comment about like,
What is all this?
He's accompanied by Sung at this time, and Sung, you kind of shift into his perspective from his perspective, and literally in first person. And Sung doesn't see anything. He just sees the interior of Shinra office tower as anybody else would. But this kind of highlights to me that Rufus now is able to also see these whispers, and that leads me to believe that anybody who is now a major player in the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake and the original has visibility of these whispers. Nothing like, mind-blowing here, but I just think that it's very interesting that they purposely and deliberately showed that Rufus can see them and Sung cannot. Anyway, we go back to the party. Cloud, Barret, Tifa, Aerith, and the whole bike chase scene that happens in the original game happens here. Obviously, with years of advanced technological improvements in video games, this version of this scene is so much better and so much more fun as compared to the original version, but the original version still has its own little charm about it, so don't hate on it too much, okay? After fighting waves of pursuing Shinra soldiers, we get to fight a couple of robots, and then of course we have this one big, six-wheeler boss of a robot that we fight. Nothing really difficult, nothing too crazy, just an overall nice little break from the monotony that was damn near the entirety of the Shinra Tower experience. Now, I say monotony, it wasn't a monotonous experience, but I think it was just a nice little palate cleanser to be on a high-speed chase and fighting off giant robots. I think that was pretty cool. So it was a good way to kind of cleanse the palate before getting into the final stage of the game. Once we fight off this last boss robot here, we get to the very edge of the highway, the very end of the highway. And you would be correct in thinking that this is kind of where things end, because in the original game, once you got to this point, this is where the party gets out of Midgar and moves on to, I believe, Calm, where then Cloud talks about the whole, all the events at Nibelheim, etc. But that's not what happens here, because as we were approaching the very end of the highway, Sephiroth shows up out of nowhere and causes Cloud to dramatically stop his motorcycle, and Tifa slamming on her brakes, and I'm pretty sure Barret and Red got rocked in the bed of the truck. So anyways, they all come to a halting stop, and of course, the minute that we pan back over to where Sephiroth was, Sephiroth is no longer there. On foot, the party approaches the literal end of the highway, and boom, Sephiroth once more descends from the skies. He touches down on the ground, on the pavement itself, and there's a bit of a dialogue that happens here. And there's a really interesting thing that Aerith says to Sephiroth here. She says,
"And you're wrong."
Those who look with clouded eyes see nothing but shadows.
Everything about you is wrong.
and I think that this statement has a whole lot more meaning than just what's there at face value. I think what she's saying here, and I don't think this is any sort of mind-bending revelation. I think what she's saying here is simply that he does not belong here in this timeline and or in this universe. And so in the last video, and I think leading up to this point in the series, one of my main arguments or theories, and I've seen this a lot now across other people's theories and whatnot, is that we're dealing with more than one Sephiroth. And we're not talking about simply the body of Sephiroth at Northern Crater and the Genova clone Sephiroths that would happen in the original game, and they would happen also here in this game. But we're dealing with the dead Sephiroth at Northern Crater. We're dealing with the Sephiroth that's stuck in Cloud's head, the one that's just constantly messing with him, mostly self-induced. We're dealing with the Genova clone Sephiroth, which is, part of the course, nothing out of the ordinary there. But we're also dealing with the one-winged angel Sephiroth. This is the Sephiroth that I believe to be from the original game and / from Advent Children. And if you've noticed this throughout the game up until Shinra Tower, every time we saw Sephiroth, it was just him. There wasn't anything additional to him, right? In Shinra Tower, as we get in the elevator to go to where Genova is being held, you see a black feather come down, right? And so that's kind of like the first indication that there is this one-winged version of Sephiroth already here. And one-winged version of Sephiroth usually doesn't happen towards the tail end of the game. And of course, he reappears again in Advent Children. But he's already made several appearances here. And as he's coming down at the end of the highway, there's a flurry of black feathers falling with him. So the Sephiroth that we're talking to here and now, and the Sephiroth that Aerith is addressing when she says that everything about you is wrong, it's not the Sephiroth that's dead and whose body is at the Northern Crater. It's not the Sephiroth that's, messing with Cloud's head. It's not the Sephiroth that's, a Genova clone. It is the Sephiroth from the original game's timeline. and slash Advent children, and that is who is standing before us now. We also get a view of the Whispers not just swarming Shinra Tower, but now I dare say there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of them swarming and engulfing the entirety of Midgar. And this is a pretty important thing here, because as this is happening, we also get a flashback, possibly, right? We'll elaborate that here in just a second. But we get a look at Zack approaching Midgar. But there's a very distinct difference and a very distinct thing going on here. You see, the timeline slash universe that we're in right now, where we're talking to Sephiroth at the highway, is a very different timeline and universe than the one we see Zack in this game, okay? And obviously the game does a super obvious thing to denote that, is the fact that when we see Zack, it's daytime, and when you are with Cloud and Party and company and Sephiroth, it is dark, it is nighttime. So then that brings the question is, what in the world are these Whispers trying to do? Because as you can also tell in Zack's timeline, Midgar is also surrounded by the same exact Whispers. Well, this actually brings out more questions than just one. So number one, what are these Whispers trying to do? And the answer to that question depends on what timeline you're looking at. So if you're looking at Zack's timeline, the answer is pretty simple. They're trying to keep Zack out. Zack needs to die. Zack is at the point in his life, you could basically judge this or call this the end of Crisis Core. He's at the point where he is about to die. So in his timeline, broad daylight, their purpose is to keep him out. In our timeline that we're currently playing through right now, their purpose is to keep us in, because there is a disturbance right now, and that disturbance is Sephiroth. And looking at these events like that, this all but confirms that there are definitely multiple universes and multiple timelines involved, right? At this point, it's safe to say it's no longer speculation on my part or anyone else's part. This confirms it 100%. Interesting thing, though, is that what Sephiroth does next is that he basically slices open a portal into like this wall of Whispers behind him, walks through and basically invites the crowd and basically invites the party to follow him, which of course is exactly what we do, because it's what we have to do next in the video game. As Cloud and the party start making their way towards this portal, Aerith grabs Cloud by the arm and tells him that this is literally the point of no return. Now, this isn't just a game trying to tell you like, hey, this is it, you're about to go into the final boss fight, there's no going back. Once you go through here, you basically got to go see things all the way through to the end. She's talking about the fact that once we go into this portal, whatever happens next is not accounted for. Tifa even asked her, like,
what will we find on the other side?
Freedom. Boundless, terrifying freedom.
and I think in this sense, freedom, without really overthinking, it's pretty simple. It means that it is this freedom from the fate that binds them, freedom from fate, freedom from destiny. That once they cross, they're going to be truly free. She asked the party to help her stop Sephiroth, because as far as she is concerned, he is the biggest threat to the planet. But she makes one other comment here. She says,
but if we do, we'll be changing more than fate itself.
that they too would be changing themselves if they were to win. And I think, honestly, this just kind of goes back to the fact that if they go through this portal, whatever happens after this now basically means that everything that happens after that moment now is completely unaccounted for. And it's kind of like a free-for-all, almost like even a free fall, right? Because not only would they be changing fate itself, they would be changing themselves, because so many things may or may not happen as a result of whatever happens once they walk through the portal that she doesn't even know what's going to happen at this point. But all she knows is that they have to go through this portal and they have to defeat Sephiroth. Naturally, of course, because the game tells us that we have to do it, we walk through the portal. On the other side, we're greeted by the Harbinger, this collection of whispers that transform into this gigantic Bahamut-looking thing almost. I initially, when I first played the game, I thought it was like a really odd version of a two-footed Bahamut minus the wings, but it's basically just a giant Harbinger whisper that also kind of spawns these three smaller Harbingers, Creseo, Viridi, and Rubrum, kind of in a last-ditch effort to stop Cloud and company, because it's very evident that Cloud and company being here is them being somewhere they are not supposed to be. And it's not just them being somewhere, but some time. They are in a time and in a place that they do not belong in. Because having gone through this portal, okay, I'm gonna go off on a little tangent here a little sooner than I anticipated, but I think that Sephiroth orchestrated all of this perfectly. And I'll elaborate on that here in just a bit. But this portal, it takes the party to this place called Destiny's Crossroads, right? And if you think about what that means, it's very simple. It's just where an intersecting point where various destinies, and we could even think of it as timelines and universes, intersect, cross, and or meet. So no one, at least as far as like Cloud, Barret, Tifa, Aerith in Red 13, they're not supposed to be there. And so these whispers and these harbingers, they don't like the fact that they are there one bit, because them being there is incredibly threatening and dangerous to their goal of preserving the original game's events, if you will. And not just the original game's events, but also just Destiny with a capital D in general. So we go ahead and fight off these three harbingers, right? The red, green, and yellow one. And, you know, as, you know, we take, you know, as we deal damage to these three, we're dealing damage to the bigger guy. And, you know, throughout the different phases of the fight, after we clear one phase, we're hit with like a flash of memories. Now, these aren't memories that are before us, that happened before the events of this boss fight, but these are the memories and or flash forwards, because they're not flashbacks, of what is or what could have happened had they had stuck to the original game's path. You see Red 13, you know, running alongside the other, you know, wolf-like creatures that you can see at the end of the original, when basically the world's all but destroyed and it's just, you know, them that are left there. And you see various different pieces of the original game story that have yet to happen in Final Fantasy VII Remake's timeline. Once we beat the Harbinger and the fight's over, we see Sephiroth once more, because of course that's like, why would that not happen? And like this giant meteor thing spawns, and you know, you start seeing these black swirls of energy, I guess if you will, all like rushing to this one purple point in the middle, which is where Sephiroth is. And all you see is all this stuff going into him and him basically consuming this. And to me now, I think that this is him literally assuming control of the Whispers. And this also tells me that he's assumed control of them, because he also gains power and abilities that he did not have, most likely, in this area until now he's consumed it all, because you can see him manipulating all the objects and chunking, you know, a chunk of Shinra Tower at Cloud, and Cloud cutting through all the concrete and debris to get to him and whatnot. So he's assumed control of the Whispers. He's got power in this area that he shouldn't even be in, and he should definitely not have any sort of power or control in, but yet here he is in control of this area, and also with full-on power. And, you know, it was inevitable. We fight Sephiroth. And we fight Sephiroth in a wonderful, absolutely wonderful boss fight. Fantastic fight, of course, with the One-Winged Angel theme song kicking off in the background. A couple different phases happen here and there. And at one point in the phases of this fight, he busts out the full-on one singular black wing, which again tells me that the Sephiroth we're fighting right now is the Sephiroth of the original game's timeline, the Sephiroth from Advent Children. They're both one and the same, and not any of the other Sephiroths that we've seen up until this point in the game. Well, I stand correct. Let me kind of backtrack on that one. The Sephiroth that we saw at the beginning of the game that touches Aerith's shoulder and kind of pauses time after the explosion of the first Mako reactor, that's the original game Sephiroth. Any of the Sephiroth encounters that we've had as Cloud where there should not have been one, I think is what we would say safely would be the original games / Advent Children Sephiroth. All the other ones, like the ones that we see in Shinra Tower, some of the events that maybe have occurred when he has little migraines or what have you, I think those were the normal Sephiroth encounters that this game was supposed to have that would have also happened in the original timeline to some degree. But ultimately speaking, the Sephiroth that we're fighting right now is the Sephiroth from the original timeline of the game. Anyway, the fight carries on, and ultimately, of course, I've said ultimately a lot here. The fight carries on, and we end up whooping that ass. I mean, it was gonna happen, especially this time around, because now I knew what I was getting into. I was a little more familiar with the game, so I knew exactly what to kind of invest points into. And, you know, the Hard Edge is like such a great weapon to use that I just made quick work of Sephiroth like it was no problem at all. At some point towards the end of the fight, Aerith makes another comment where she says, we can do this, we can change things, we can make it right. And obviously, to me, what this means is that this is not supposed to be happening. Like this Sephiroth is not supposed to be here. And she is fully aware that his presence here in this timeline is wrong and is what's causing a lot of the issues that are happening here before us. And, you know, if you're new to the series and you haven't seen the other 4 videos, highly recommend that you do. But ultimately, my big theory, and a lot of other theories, or a lot of other people theorize the same thing, is that when Aerith was looking into the live stream at the beginning of the game, I believe that the Aerith from the original game had somehow projected all of the events and everything that happened in the original game into this Aerith that we have here before us now, so that she could kind of be aware of what happened and how things were supposed to happen, and ultimately maybe even down to what the original version Sephiroth is planning on doing in this timeline. Now, if him controlling like Shinra Tower debris in this realm was not evidence enough that he now has control of the Whispers and is basically controlling fate for that matter, is that if that's not enough to convince you, he literally launches Whispers at the party at this point. So when I say that all those black swirls were, you know, basically rushing into him, it's kind of like on par with his original plan of like damaging the planet, forcing the planet's life stream to come out to the point of impact of the meteor to heal itself, where he would then be there to consume the life stream and become godlike. He took the same approach here, but instead of consuming the life stream, he consumed the Whispers in the AKA Harbingers of Fate. And there's a very specific reason why he did this. We'll see here shortly. As the Whispers are rushing at the party members, you know, everyone else kind of starts fighting them off and, you know, defeating them actually a lot easier than they were before. And Cloud takes off after Sephiroth and gives him one final blow. But the interesting thing with this blow is that Sephiroth kind of has a bit of a smirk, like an accepting smile or an accepting look on his face, which tells me that to him, this is now all gone according to plan, because he does nothing to defend himself at this point. He lets Cloud hit him, and you see this, you know, this really bright white flash of energy when Cloud hits Sephiroth at this point. And at this point, when this happens, I believe that Sephiroth allowed himself to be, for lack of a better term, killed. And in effect, in doing so, he has now allowed Cloud and manipulated Cloud and company in killing off the Whispers. And in doing so, now there is no force determining what will happen in regards to fate and or destiny. Soon after this, we find ourselves once more face-to-face, one-on-one with Sephiroth, but this time there's a bit of a dialogue going on. We find out that we are now at the edge of creation, okay? And at this point, in this dialogue between Cloud and Sephiroth, Sephiroth tells him that which lies ahead does not yet exist. And it's a supporting statement, basically saying, hey, look, after what you just did now, everything that's in your head that you think is going to happen does not exist anymore. Now things can happen in any way possible, and nobody knows how things are going to transpire from this moment on. That ultimately meaning that now, as of this moment forward, everything's starting off from a blank, fresh slate. Sephiroth even goes as far as inviting Cloud to join him, asking him to lend him his strength in defying destiny, at which point, of course, Cloud refuses. You know, takes a step back, draws his weapon, and the two dance a little. You know, really epic little fight scene going on here. But for a moment here, I thought that this was a good way of showcasing that both Cloud and Sephiroth are equals, and to a degree, they are. Maybe not so much in terms of like combat and power and, you know, fighting prowess, but just in terms of their importance to this universe, or importance to the story, or importance to the way these events will result, right? I think they're both very equal in this regard. And you get this one scene where, you know, Sephiroth finally blocks one of Cloud's hits, pushes him off, and then rushes at him and swaps away at his sword. And, you know, Cloud's sword goes flying away off in the distance. And that's when he leans in.
7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps. But what will you do with it? Let's see.
And this one statement has driven people mad online, myself included, as to what in the world could it possibly mean. 7 seconds till the end. Enough time perhaps for you, but what will you do with it? Let's see. I could not, for the life of me, ever understand what this could possibly mean until I got to this last portion of the game this time around. So my whole theory up to this point now is concluding with the fact that Sephiroth, the one-winged angel version of Sephiroth, has orchestrated all of these events to happen precisely as they have now happened, ultimately culminating in him absorbing the Whispers and Cloud killing him off, and them now both being here at the edge of creation. And he says 7 seconds till the end. I don't think that 7 seconds to the end means that in 7 seconds everything's going to end. He has a decision to make now. And I started to wonder what event, what in the original game story could have massive implications that happened within 7 seconds. And I know you can do that for any moment possible, right? But if you look at Aerith's death scene, spoilers, sorry if I spoil that for anybody, from the moment that you see the camera start to pan out and you hear a very distinct sound effect, and I'm probably reaching, y'all, I probably am reaching, but just bear with me, okay? From the moment you hear that and you see that happening, as the camera pans up and you see Sephiroth falling down, to the moment that his sword impales Aerith, is exactly 7 seconds. I think based on what we've seen so far, it's safe to say that Sephiroth, again, has orchestrated everything to happen the way it has happened right now, but it's not about every single event that's happened leading up to this point in Final Fantasy VII Remake. The important thing is that specific events had to happen. And right now, there are 3 events, I believe, had to happen to get to this point. Well, 2 events to get to this point and 1 event coming up. The first event is that Sephiroth had to mess with fate enough and try to divert it enough to force the Whispers into closing off Midgar, for lack of a better term. When this happens, you notice that it also happens not just in our timeline, but it also happens in Zack's timeline. And what this tells us, of course, is that the Whispers act as one across multiple universes, across multiple timelines. So in this moment earlier in the game, when the Whispers are engulfing Midgar, it's happening at every single possible existence or instance of Midgar that exists right now in this game. At this exact moment in time, Sephiroth cuts open a portal and takes everybody to Destiny's Crossroads. That means that this is a one singular point where all of these universes, all of these timelines converge right here, right then, right now. Okay. So this is where we're at right now. This is the number 1 event, is that he had to force them to do this so that he could catch them all perfectly aligned and cutting this portal open to Destiny's Crossroads, which then, of course, brings about the confrontation and the fight against Harbinger, which leads to event number 2. Event number 2 being he is at the exact moment and time and place he needs to be to consume the Whispers, which then drives Cloud into fighting him and delivering a killing blow, allowing him to manipulate the party into killing off the Whispers. Now, at this point, with the Whispers gone, there is nothing, no force out there that is going to dictate how fate and destiny transpires from here on out. The third and possibly most pivotal moment now, which is what I believe he's referencing when he says 7 seconds here, is Aerith's death. Cloud knows that this is going to happen. He's seen it in his head multiple times throughout Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I believe Sephiroth is trying to force him to come to terms with the fact that this is going to happen. Not so much like in terms of like, oh my God, she's going to die, but like, this is going to happen. I'm giving you plenty of notice so that you can prepare to do something about it. And what I wonder and what I think here is that every single time this event happens, and every single time that the event happens that Aerith dies as a result, this cycle kind of repeats itself, right? So I'm thinking that Sephiroth is trying to drive Cloud to make a decision in 7 seconds to save Aerith, but not himself. And when he says that it's enough time for him to save himself, meaning that if he does nothing, if he lets Aerith die, it's enough to save himself. Because again, I said in a video several videos ago that if Aerith projected all these events to Aerith in Final Fantasy VII Remake, and if Sephiroth is able to basically project himself into this timeline, then why couldn't the same be said for Cloud, especially if Cloud was also in the live stream at one point in the original game's events? So when he says save yourself, I don't think he's talking about this Cloud saving himself in regards to him not taking the sword for Aerith. I think he means that in result of him not taking action and letting Aerith die, he would wind up in the live stream again, and this whole cycle would repeat over and over and over again, thus preserving himself and carrying it on into the next timeline and to the next one and into the next one. I don't know if what I just said made any sense. It makes sense in my head, but let me know in the comments below if that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and I'll try to elaborate a little bit more, but I'm hoping that that kind of paints the picture of what I'm thinking is happening here. Anyway, this cutscene's over with, and now we see Zack. And here is where things continue to get crazy, because Zack has now survived the encounter that was meant to claim his life. And if you needed further evidence that there's multiple timelines or parallel universes at work, there's this little bag of chips that floats on by that the game deliberately slows down on, and you see Stamp, the Shinra mascot. Now, this whole time throughout Final Fantasy VII Remake, we've seen Stamp, spray painted as a guide for Avalanche to get from one place to the other, except Stamp in this instance is a beagle, if I recall correctly. And the Stamp that we see on this little bag of potato chips is like a terrier. It's a whole different breed of dog. So pretty evident, very clear, very obvious, and in our face that this is a very different timeline and a universe, if you will, at play right now where Zack survives. And not only does Zack survive, but he has Cloud with him, and they both make their way towards Midgar, which is now no longer being surrounded by the Whispers, because at Destiny's Crossroads, the Whispers were killed off by Cloud and company. A couple of other things that we see in Zack's timeline now, which we'll refer to it as such. In Zack's timeline, we see that Wedge has survived the plate incident at Sector 7. Possibly even Jessie. I think it's either her gloves, because I thought it was her bandana, but I realized that Wedge also wore a red bandana. I think the glove that's on the dresser there next to Wedge's bed is also Jessie's glove. So there's a really good chance that Jessie survived in this timeline here. And other than that, I mean, it's pretty much end of game at this point. We see a little cutscene with the party. Cloud basically saying that, Sephiroth's got to be stopped. He's the problem. He's got to be dealt with. And of course, Barret, Tifa, Aerith, Red, they're all like, yep, we're in, buddy. Let's go kick some ass. So the party decides to go ahead and move on with their journey and head on out of Midgard and following, Sephiroth, trying to track him down. And something really peculiar happens. And this is such a beautiful moment in the game too, where like you see Cloud and Zack coming towards the party. As the party's walking away from Midgar, Zack and Cloud are walking towards Midgar, or hobbling rather, but they're clearly not in the same timeline. They're not in the same physical space, but they are in the same time, if that kind of makes sense, right? And so as they pass each other up, no one notices anyone except for Aerith. As Zack passes her up and she passes him up, she stops, dead in her tracks. Very evident that she kind of feels his presence or feels something's a little different this time around. And now that leads me to believe that either A, she's had the ability to kind of see things across different timelines this whole time, which is kind of alluding to the fact of how, Aerith from the original projected everything to this one. Or B, now that the Whispers were all eliminated at a point where all of them were basically aligned in this one event, now things are a little bit more open to her to be able to kind of see things and feel things across different universes and different timelines. But ladies and gents, with that being said, this is the end. We have reached the absolute end of Final Fantasy VII Remake. What an absolutely great game. I loved every second of it. I loved it more the second time than I did the first time. And in 10 days time, because as of this recording, it is February 19th. In 10 days time, we will continue this in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So make sure y'all come back, because I will be doing the same approach that I did here with Final Fantasy VII Remake, but instead with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And we'll be doing it together as we all play through the game together. I appreciate y'all once again. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the comment. Thank you for the supports. Let me know in the comments below, right? Let me know what you think. What are your theories? What do you think about mine? Am I wrong? Am I right? Do you want to add on to mine? Do you want to take away from mine? Y'all let me know in the comments below. Until next time, be good to yourselves. Be good to one another. Peace out.